The ballroom glittered with 1,000 candles, but Amelia Hartwell saw only the man approaching through the crowd, the man who had shattered her heart 2 seasons ago. Nicholas Barrett moved with practiced elegance, his new wife's jewels catching the light like stars. He'd chosen wealth over love, just as society demanded. And now, as his eyes found Amelia standing alone near the marble columns, that familiar mocking smile curved his lips. "Lady Amelia," he said, his voice carrying just far enough for nearby guests to hear, "still attending these affairs. I see." He paused, letting the silence stretch cruelly. "Without a husband, I see? How unfortunate. Though I suppose at your age, with your circumstances, prospects become rather limited." The words landed like physical blows. Amelia felt the familiar burn of humiliation rising in her chest, the same shame she'd felt when he'd publicly declared her unsuitable for a man of his ambitions. Then she felt it, a warm, possessive hand at her waist, a presence that commanded the entire room without speaking a word, the subtle scent of sandalwood and something uniquely masculine. "I beg your pardon," a voice like dark velvet said behind her. "I believe you are addressing my wife." Loving this story? Tap like and subscribe, and enter Duke's Chamber Secrets. Your next obsession begins now. The spring of 1815 had brought Amelia Hartwell nothing but grey skies and greyer prospects. She stood at the window of her father's modest London townhouse in Bloomsbury, watching rain streak down the glass like tears she no longer allowed herself to shed. At 22, she had become what society whispered about in drawing rooms, a woman past her prime, a cautionary tale, a young lady whose best chance had come and gone 2 years ago when Nicholas Barrett had publicly declared her unsuitable. "Amelia, darling, you must stop brooding," her mother's voice carried from the doorway, edged with the familiar mixture of concern and exasperation. "Lady Pembroke has invited us to her garden party this afternoon. You should wear the blue muslin. It brings out your eyes." Amelia turned from the window. Her mother stood framed in the doorway, still beautiful despite the fine lines that worry had etched around her eyes. Lady Hartwell had married for love a younger son with more charm than fortune, and had spent 25 years learning to live with the consequences of that choice. "I'm not certain I wish to attend, Mama." "Not certain?" Her mother crossed the room, taking Amelia's hands in her own. "My dear, you cannot hide away forever. What Nicholas did was cruel, unconscionable even, but you are still young. There are other gentlemen who want younger ladies with larger dowries," Amelia finished quietly. "I understand the mathematics of the marriage market, Mama. I have become a poor investment." Lady Hartwell's grip tightened. "You are worth 10 of Miss Caroline Ashford, that shallow creature Nicholas married, and I will not hear you speak of yourself as an investment, as if you were shares in some canal company." Despite herself, Amelia smiled slightly. Her mother's fierce loyalty was one of the few comforts remaining in her circumscribed world. "Very well, I shall wear the blue muslin and smile politely at Lady Pembroke's garden party, but I make no promises beyond that." Lady Pembroke's garden party proved to be exactly as tedious as Amelia had anticipated. The rain had cleared, leaving the world washed clean and sparkling, but Amelia felt none of the renewal that spring usually brought. She moved through the crowds with practiced grace, accepting condolences disguised as conversation, deflecting questions about her matrimonial prospects with gentle humor that hid the ache beneath. Lady Amelia, Mrs. Weatherby, one of the ton's most dedicated gossips, descended upon her near the rose arbor. "How lovely to see you, my dear. Still in London for the season, I see." "Yes, Mrs. Weatherby. My parents enjoy the spring here." "Quite right, quite right." The older woman's eyes gleamed with poorly concealed curiosity. "And have you heard? Nicholas Barrett and his wife are expected back in town next week. Their first season as a married couple. I'm sure it will be quite the spectacle. Caroline does love to display those vulgar jewels her father purchased for her." The barb was calculated, designed to draw blood. Amelia had learned to recognize such attacks in the 2 years since her humiliation. "How delightful for them," she said evenly. "I wish them every happiness." Mrs. Weatherby looked disappointed by her lack of reaction. "Well, yes, quite generous of you, considering. But then, you always were a kind girl." She paused, then delivered her parting shot with the precision of an assassin. "Such a pity kindness doesn't secure husbands. Still, perhaps a widower might." "Mrs. Weatherby," a voice interrupted, deep and unmistakably aristocratic. How unexpected to find you discussing other people's matrimonial affairs rather than your own grandson's rather spectacular gambling debts. I hear he lost £3,000 at Watier's last week. The family must be quite concerned." Amelia turned to find a tall man standing behind her, his dark hair slightly too long to be fashionable, his green eyes cold as winter frost. She recognized him immediately. Everyone did. Alexander Kingswell, Duke of Ashbourne, was not a man one forgot. Mrs. Weatherby's face had gone pale, then florid. "Your Grace, I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "Don't you?" The Duke's tone suggested he found her ignorance unconvincing. "How peculiar. The entire membership of Watier's seems quite informed about young Mr. Weatherby's situation. But perhaps you're right, far more interesting to speculate about young ladies' futures than to address one's own family difficulties." It was a devastating cut, delivered with surgical precision. Mrs. Weatherby stammered something incoherent and retreated with as much dignity as she could salvage, which was very little indeed. Amelia found herself alone with the Duke, unsure whether to thank him or be mortified that he'd witnessed her humiliation. "That was kind of you, Your Grace," she managed, "though unnecessary. I'm quite accustomed to Mrs. Weatherby's particular brand of concern." "Kindness had nothing to do with it," the Duke said flatly. "I simply dislike hypocrisy, and I particularly dislike women who take pleasure in others' misfortune." He studied her with those penetrating green eyes, and Amelia felt suddenly exposed, as if he could see past her carefully maintained composure to the wounded pride beneath. "Walk with me, Lady Amelia," he said abruptly. It was not quite a command, but neither was it a request. Confused but curious, Amelia nodded. They moved away from the crowds, down a path lined with lavender that led to a more secluded corner of the garden. The Duke walked with his hands clasped behind his back, his expression thoughtful. "I am going to say something extremely irregular," he began without preamble. "I would ask that you hear me out completely before responding." Amelia's pulse quickened. "Very well, Your Grace. I am in need of a wife." The words hung in the air between them, stark and unexpected. Amelia stopped walking, turning to face him fully. The Duke continued, his tone businesslike, as if discussing a proposed investment rather than marriage. "I am 32 years old. I have held my title for 14 years since my father's death. In that time, I have rebuilt the Ashbourne fortune from near bankruptcy to considerable wealth. I have estates in Hampshire, Yorkshire, and Scotland. I have political influence in the House of Lords. What I lack is a duchess and an heir." "Your Grace, I don't understand why you're telling me this." "Because I wish to offer you the position." His green eyes fixed on hers with unnerving intensity. "I have observed you over the past several months, Lady Amelia. You possess intelligence, dignity, and grace under circumstances that would have broken lesser women. You do not simper or flatter. You engage in genuine conversation about matters of substance. You have been treated abominably by society, yet you maintain your composure and your kindness." Amelia's mind reeled. "Your Grace, surely there are dozens of young ladies who would—" "Dozens of silly girls who see only my title and my wealth," he interrupted, "who would bore me to tears within a fortnight and prove utterly incapable of managing a ducal household. I don't want a silly girl, Lady Amelia. I want a partner." "A partner," she echoed faintly. "A practical arrangement." He stepped closer, his expression serious. "I require a wife who can manage my households, represent me in society, and eventually provide me with an heir. You require security, position, and protection from the kind of casual cruelty Mrs. Weatherby just demonstrated. We can provide each other with exactly what we need." "And love?" The word escaped before Amelia could stop it. Something flickered in the Duke's eyes, pain, perhaps, or old fear. "Love is not part of this arrangement. My parents married for love, Lady Amelia. Their passionate attachment led to reckless spending, scandal, and near ruin. I inherited a dukedom on the brink of collapse because my father loved my mother too much to deny her anything. I have spent 14 years rebuilding what their love destroyed." His voice hardened. "I will not repeat their mistakes. I offer you respect, security, and freedom within the bounds of propriety. I will expect competence, discretion, and civility. What I will not offer, what I cannot offer, is romantic sentiment. If you require pretty words and declarations of affection, You should refuse me now." Amelia stared at him, trying to process this extraordinary proposition. It was everything her practical mind told her to accept: security, position, protection, and nothing her wounded heart wanted. No love, no affection, just a business arrangement with a man who looked at marriage as he might look at a contract for mining rights. And yet, Nicholas had offered pretty words. He had written her poetry, compared her eyes to starlight, sworn he would love her forever. Then he had abandoned her the moment a wealthier prospect appeared, humiliating her publicly to justify his own mercenary choice. His pretty words had meant nothing. The Duke was at least honest, brutally so. "Might I have time to consider your offer?" she asked quietly. "Of course. I will call upon your father in 3 days' time. If you wish to decline, send word before then." He paused, studying her face. "I am aware of your history with Nicholas Barrett, Lady Amelia. I mention this only to assure you that I would never treat you with such disrespect. Whatever else our marriage might be, it would be honorable. You would be the Duchess of Ashbourne. That means something. You would mean something." The simple statement, delivered without dramatics or false sentiment, somehow touched her more than any flowery declaration could have. "Thank you, Your Grace," she managed. "I shall consider your offer carefully." He inclined his head slightly. "That is all I ask. Good afternoon, Lady Amelia." He turned and walked away, leaving Amelia standing alone in the lavender-scented garden, her mind spinning with possibilities she had never imagined. That evening, Amelia sat in her father's study, the only room in their modest townhouse that felt substantial enough for the conversation they were about to have. Sir William Hartwell was a gentle man who had spent his life as a country baronet, managing his small estate with careful competence, if not brilliance. He loved his only daughter with quiet devotion and had watched helplessly as society's cruelty wounded her. "The Duke of Ashbourne called upon me this afternoon," he said, settling into his worn leather chair. "He asked permission to pay his addresses to you." "I know, Papa. He spoke with me first, at Lady Pembroke's garden party." Her father's eyebrows rose. "Did he indeed? That's rather unconventional." "The Duke appears to value directness." Amelia took a steadying breath. "He has proposed a practical arrangement, Papa, a marriage of mutual benefit, rather than affection." "I see." Sir William was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward. "What do you want, my dear? Not what you think you should want, or what your mother and I might hope for you. What do you truly want?" Amelia felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't know anymore, Papa. 2 years ago, I wanted love. I believed Nicholas when he said he cared for me. That humiliation taught me that love, or what passes for it, can be weaponized. Used to hurt. Not all love is false, Amelia. No, but I no longer trust my ability to recognize the true from the false." She met her father's kind eyes. "The Duke offers something I can understand, terms I can accept, security without sentiment. It feels safer." "Safe is not the same as happy, my dear." "Perhaps not, but I think happiness is too much to hope for. The Duke is honest about what he can offer. There's something to be said for that, isn't there?" Sir William sighed deeply. "I will tell you what I know of Alexander Kingswell. He inherited young, under terrible circumstances. His parents' marriage was passionate but destructive. They spent everything, scandalized society, and left him to pick up the pieces. He has rebuilt the Ashbourne fortune through intelligence and relentless work. He is respected, if not liked. He pays his debts, treats his servants fairly, and keeps his word." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "He is not offering you romance, Amelia, but he is offering you something perhaps more valuable: reliability. The Duke will not make promises he cannot keep. If he says he will respect you, he will. If he says he will protect you, he will." "Then you would not oppose the match?" "I would not oppose anything that brings you peace, my daughter. But I would ask you one question: can you accept a marriage without love? Truly accept it, without hope or expectation that it might change?" Amelia thought of Nicholas's betrayal, of 2 years of pitying glances and whispered speculation, of becoming what she had feared most: a cautionary tale, a woman passed over, diminished. "I think I can, Papa. I think perhaps I must." 2 days later, Amelia sent word to the Duke that she would accept his proposal. The wedding took place 1 week afterward, by special license, in the drawing room of the Hartwell townhouse. It was a small affair, immediate family only, and conducted with more efficiency than sentiment. The Duke Alexander, she must learn to call him Alexander arrived punctually, dressed in impeccable dark blue superfine and buff breeches. He spoke his vows in a clear, firm voice. When the vicar pronounced them man and wife, Alexander kissed her cheek with the same polite formality he might have used greeting an acquaintance in Hyde Park. "Well then, Lady Ashbourne," he said, the title strange in her ears, "shall we proceed to the wedding breakfast?" The breakfast was brief. Amelia's mother wept quietly into her handkerchief. Her father made a short toast about happiness and partnership. Alexander's only living relative, a cousin named Edmund, attended with poorly concealed resentment and left as quickly as politeness allowed. By 3 o'clock, Amelia found herself in Alexander's carriage, travelling to his London residence in Berkeley Square. Her trunks had been sent ahead. Her life had been packed into boxes and transported while she stood in a drawing-room and promised to honour and obey a man she barely knew. The townhouse was magnificent, 4 stories of elegant Portland stone, with a black lacquered door and windows that gleamed in the afternoon light. Inside, the entrance hall took Amelia's breath away. Black and white marble floors, a sweeping staircase, and furnishings that spoke of generations of wealth and taste. Mrs. Thornbury, the housekeeper, was a thin woman with sharp eyes and an unexpectedly warm smile. "Welcome home, Your Grace. His Grace has instructed me to show you to your chambers and ensure you have everything you require." "Thank you, Mrs. Thornbury." The chambers prepared for Amelia occupied an entire wing of the second floor. The bedroom was decorated in shades of cream and gold, with tall windows overlooking the garden. A sitting room adjoined it, already stocked with books and writing materials. Everything was beautiful, tasteful, and utterly impersonal. "His Grace's chambers are in the East Wing," Mrs. Thornbury said carefully. "He asked me to inform you that he will not disturb you this evening. He thought you might wish to rest after the day's events." Amelia felt relief and something else, something that might have been disappointment, though she couldn't imagine why. "That's very considerate of him." After Mrs. Thornbury left, Amelia stood alone in her beautiful new rooms, in her beautiful new home, married to a man who had promised her everything except the one thing she secretly, shamefully still wanted, to be loved. She moved to the window and looked out over the garden, where twilight was painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Somewhere in this vast house, Alexander was likely in his study, reviewing accounts or correspondence, treating their wedding day like any other business transaction, successfully concluded. This was what she had agreed to: security without sentiment, respect without romance, a practical arrangement between 2 practical people. Amelia touched her wedding ring, a heavy gold band with the Ashbourne crest, and wondered if she would ever stop feeling like she had traded one kind of loneliness for another. But she was safe now, protected. She would be the Duchess of Ashbourne, and no one, not Nicholas Barrett, not Mrs. Weatherby, not anyone would ever pity her again. It would have to be enough. Even if, in the deepest hours of the night when she finally lay in her grand new bed, she allowed herself one silent wish, that the man sleeping in the East Wing might someday look at her with something warmer than polite respect. Just once, just to know what it felt like. Amelia woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the quiet knock of a maid she'd never met. "Good morning, Your Grace." The young woman bobbed a curtsy, carrying a breakfast tray laden with far more food than Amelia could possibly consume. "His Grace requested that breakfast be brought to your chambers this morning. He thought you might prefer to rest after yesterday's events." Asterisk, His Grace thought. His Grace requested. Asterisk. Already her life was being shaped by a man she barely knew, however considerate his intentions might be. "Thank you," Amelia managed, sitting up and accepting the tray. "What is your name?" "Sarah, Your Grace." The girl looked surprised to be asked. "I'm to be your lady's maid, if that pleases you." "It pleases me very much." "Thank you, Sarah." After the maid left, Amelia picked at the food, coddled eggs, toast, jam, chocolate, and tried to reconcile herself to this new reality. She was the Duchess of Ashbourne. She lived in a grand house in Berkeley Square. She had servants who called her Your Grace, and a husband who slept in a different wing. A husband who had promised her everything except love. She had just finished dressing, with Sarah's nervous assistance, when Mrs. Thornbury appeared at her door. "His Grace requests your presence in his study, Your Grace. When you are ready." "Of course." Amelia's stomach tightened with unexpected nerves. "I'm ready now." The study was a masculine room on the ground floor, lined with books and dominated by a massive mahogany desk. Alexander stood as she entered, setting aside the papers he'd been reviewing. In the morning light, she noticed details she'd been too overwhelmed to register yesterday. The slight scar above his left eyebrow, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead when he wasn't in company, the breadth of his shoulders beneath his perfectly tailored coat. He was, she realized with a flutter she tried to ignore, extraordinarily handsome, perhaps the most handsome man she'd ever seen. "Good morning," he said. "I trust you slept well?" "Yes, thank you. And thank you for the breakfast. That was thoughtful." "It was practical," he corrected, though his tone wasn't harsh. "You were exhausted. There's no need to observe formal meal times in your own home." He gestured to a chair near his desk. "Please, sit. There are matters we should discuss." Amelia settled into the leather chair, acutely aware of his gaze upon her. "First," Alexander began, remaining standing with one hand resting on his desk, "I want you to understand your position and authority in this household. You are the Duchess of Ashbourne. The household staff answers to you. You have complete authority over domestic arrangements, the social calendar, and household expenditures." He withdrew a leather portfolio from his desk drawer. "You have an annual household allowance of £5,000, more if you require it for legitimate expenses. This is for your personal use, clothing, charitable donations, gifts, whatever you deem necessary." Amelia's eyes widened. £5,000 was more than twice her father's entire annual income. "That's extraordinarily generous." "It's appropriate," Alexander said firmly. "You will represent this family in society. I will not have my Duchess appearing in last season's gowns or unable to host properly." He paused, studying her. "You seem uncomfortable with the sum." "I'm not accustomed to such abundance." Something flickered in his expression. "You will become accustomed. This is your life now, Amelia." He used her given name for the first time, and she felt an unexpected warmth at the sound of it. "I may not offer you romantic sentiment, but I will ensure you want for nothing material." He returned to the desk and withdrew a small velvet box. "Which brings me to my second point. Last night you wore your mother's pearls to our wedding. They're lovely, but insufficient for a duchess. These belong to my grandmother." He opened the box to reveal a stunning sapphire necklace with matching earrings, the stones so deeply blue they seemed to hold midnight within them. "Alexander, I cannot." "You can and you will." His tone brooked no argument. "There are other pieces in the vault, emeralds, rubies, diamonds. Mrs. Thornbury will show you the collection this afternoon. Choose what appeals to you." "This is too much." "It is necessary." He closed the box and set it on the desk between them. "We will be attending the Duchess of Devonshire's ball in 3 days' time. It will be our first public appearance as a married couple. Society will be watching, judging, gossiping. You must look every inch the Duchess of Ashbourne. The ball, 3 days away, where all of society would see her, transformation from pitiable spinster to duchess, where Nicholas and his wife might be in attendance." "I understand," she said quietly. "Do you?" Alexander moved around the desk, standing closer now. "Society can be vicious, Amelia. You know this already. They will speculate about why I married you so suddenly. Some will be cruel, others will be falsely kind while hiding their jealousy." He paused, his green eyes intense. "I will not tolerate disrespect toward you, from anyone. You are my wife. You represent this family. An insult to you is an insult to me, and I do not forgive insults." The fierceness in his voice surprised her. This was not the detached businessman who had proposed a practical arrangement. This was something else, something protective and almost possessive. "Thank you," she managed, "though I've learned to bear society's cruelty." "You won't have to anymore." He said it with such finality that Amelia almost believed him. "You are the Duchess of Ashbourne now. That means something. You mean something." He had said those exact words in the garden when he proposed, as if he needed her to believe them, as if perhaps he needed to believe them himself. "I should let you settle in," Alexander said, stepping back, retreating once more behind his formal demeanor. "Mrs. Thornbury will help you familiarize yourself with the household. This afternoon, Lady Castlereagh is calling. She's an old family friend and will help guide you through society's expectations. I'll be in meetings at the House of Lords until evening." "Will we?" Amelia hesitated. "Will we dine together?" Something shifted in his expression. "Would you like to?" "Yes, I think. I think if we're to be partners, as you said, we should at least know each other." The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close. "Very well. Dinner at 8. I'll have cook prepare something special." After he left, Amelia sat alone in the study, the sapphire box gleaming on the desk. She picked it up, opening it once more to study the jewels that represented her new life. Beautiful, valuable, cold, rather like the marriage itself, she thought. But perhaps, in time, even cold things could warm. She would have to hope so, because despite every practical reason she'd accepted this arrangement, despite knowing love was not part of their bargain, some foolish part of her heart had already begun to wonder. What if? Asterisk, asterisk. 3 months later. Asterisk, asterisk. Amelia had not expected to be happy in her practical marriage, yet she found herself dangerously close to contentment. The past 3 months had established a rhythm between herself and Alexander, a careful dance of mutual respect and growing companionship. They breakfasted together most mornings, discussing the day's obligations over coffee and toast. They dined together each evening, conversations ranging from politics to literature to estate management. Twice a week, they rode together in Hyde Park before the fashionable hour, when the paths were quiet and they could speak freely. Alexander had proven himself exactly what he promised: honorable, respectful, generous. He consulted her opinions on household matters and increasingly on social and political issues. He ensured she had everything she needed. He defended her reputation with fierce consistency whenever society's gossips grew too bold. What he did not provide was affection. They maintained separate chambers. He never touched her beyond the formal a hand at her elbow, an arm offered for escort. He called her Amelia in private and "my Duchess" in public, but never "my dear" or any other endearment. It was exactly what they had agreed upon, and yet Amelia found herself wanting more with each passing day. She was dwelling on this uncomfortable truth when Mr. Pemberton, their solicitor, arrived unexpectedly on a bright June morning. "Your Grace," Mrs. Thornbury announced, "Mr. Pemberton requests an urgent meeting with you and His Grace." Amelia found Alexander already in the study, his expression curious. Mr. Pemberton stood clutching a leather case, his usually composed face showing unusual excitement. "Your Graces, forgive the intrusion, but I bring extraordinary news." He withdrew documents from his case with trembling hands. "Lady Pemberton, the Dowager Countess of Pemberton, passed away last week at her estate in Cornwall." "I'm sorry to hear it," Amelia said, confused. "Though I confess I barely remember Lady Pemberton. She was my godmother, but we met perhaps 3 times when I was a child." "Nevertheless, Your Grace, she remembered you." Mr. Pemberton's smile was almost giddy. "And she has left you her entire fortune." The room fell silent. "I beg your pardon?" Amelia whispered. "Her entire fortune, Your Grace." Lady Pemberton had no children, no close relations. Her husband died 20 years ago. She lived quietly in Cornwall, investing wisely and accumulating considerable wealth. He placed a document before her. "She has left you £80,000, 3 estates, 1 in Cornwall, 1 in Devon, 1 in Leicestershire, and various investments including shares in several profitable ventures." Amelia stared at the numbers swimming before her eyes. £80,000, 3 estates. She had gone from a modest dowry of £3,000 to being independently wealthy in the span of a single morning. "This cannot be correct," she managed. "It is entirely correct, Your Grace. I've verified everything. Lady Pemberton's will is unambiguous. She wrote that she followed your life from a distance, that she admired your dignity and grace, and that she wished to provide for you as she would have for a daughter." Amelia looked up at Alexander. He stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable, but something in his eyes, was it shock, fear, made her heart clench. "This is extraordinary news," Alexander said, his voice carefully neutral. "Lady Amelia, forgive me. Her Grace will need time to process this. Mr. Pemberton, please prepare all necessary documents. We'll review everything and respond within the week." "Of course, Your Grace." Mr. Pemberton bowed. "May I offer my congratulations, Your Grace?" This is a remarkable inheritance. After the solicitor departed, silence descended upon the study. Amelia sat frozen, her mind struggling to comprehend the transformation. She was wealthy now, independently, substantially wealthy. Wealthier than Nicholas's wife Caroline, whose father's money had been the prize that won her a husband. Wealthier than most of the ton. She no longer needed the Duke of Ashbourne's protection or provision. "Amelia," Alexander began, then stopped. He moved to the window, his back to her, his posture rigid. "This changes things." Does it? Her voice sounded small to her own ears. Of course it does. He turned to face her, and the coldness in his expression struck her like a physical blow. You married me for security. You no longer require that security. You are now a woman of independent means. Understanding crashed over her. He thought she would leave. Alexander, I won't hold you to vows made under different circumstances, he continued, his tone clipped and formal. If you wish to establish your own household, to live independently, I will not prevent it. We can arrange a discreet separation. Your reputation will be protected. You are the Duchess of Ashbourne, and that cannot be taken from you. You want me to leave? The words emerged as barely more than a whisper. I want you to be free to choose. But his jaw was clenched, his hands fisted at his sides. You accepted my proposal because you had limited options. Now you have unlimited options. You don't need me anymore. The realization struck Amelia with painful clarity. Alexander was protecting himself. Just as his parents' passionate love had led to ruin, he feared that her newfound independence would lead to abandonment. He was pushing her away before she could leave him. And if I don't wish to leave? She asked quietly. His expression flickered surprise, hope, quickly shuttered. Why would you stay? You have everything now. Freedom, wealth, independence. You could live exactly as you please without the constraints of this arrangement. This arrangement is my marriage, Alexander. Amelia stood, moving closer to him. When I accepted your proposal, yes, I needed security, but that is not why I've stayed these past 3 months. Then why? The question was almost desperate. Because I've been happy here. Because our conversations are the best part of my day. Because you've shown me more genuine respect and care than anyone else in my life. She took a breath, gathering courage. Because somewhere between your practical proposal and these past 3 months, I have come to care for you deeply. Alexander stared at her as if she'd spoken a foreign language. You care for me? Yes. I know that wasn't part of our agreement. I know you don't want love or sentiment. But I cannot help what I feel. Amelia, you don't understand. His voice was rough. My parents' love destroyed everything. My father gave my mother anything she wanted. Spent money they didn't have. Scandalized society to please her whims. I inherited debts, mortgaged estates, and a reputation in tatters. It took 14 years to rebuild what their passion destroyed. I am not your mother, Amelia said firmly, and you are not your father. Their love may have been destructive, but that was because it lacked partnership, mutual respect, and responsibility. What we have built is entirely different. She stepped closer still, close enough to see the war raging in his green eyes. My inheritance doesn't change what we are to each other, Alexander. If anything, it proves that I'm choosing to stay not because I need to, but because I want to. You should want more than this cold arrangement, he said roughly. You should want someone who can give you the romance you deserve. I tried romance with Nicholas Barrett. He wrote me poetry and made promises, then abandoned me the moment a better prospect appeared. His pretty words meant nothing. She held his gaze steadily. You have given me honesty, respect, and partnership. That is worth infinitely more than empty romance. Alexander's composure was cracking. She could see it in the way his breathing had quickened, in the tension radiating from every line of his body. If you stay, nothing will change. I cannot become someone different, someone who... I'm not asking you to change. I'm asking you to trust me. Amelia reached out, touching his hand the first time she had ever initiated contact. Trust that I'm staying by choice. Trust that this inheritance doesn't diminish what we've built together. He looked down at her hand on his expression torn between longing and fear. I don't know how to do this, Amelia. I've spent 14 years building walls, maintaining control. Then we'll learn together. She squeezed his hand gently. We're partners, remember? You said so yourself. For a long moment, Alexander simply looked at her. Then, slowly, his fingers curled around hers, holding on as if she were the only solid thing in a tilting world. I don't deserve you, he said quietly. That's not for you to decide. I've made my choice, Alexander. I'm staying. Something in his expression softened, the first genuine warmth she'd seen break through his careful control. Then, stay, please. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't poetry or grand romance, but it was real, raw, and honest. And to Amelia, it meant everything. The announcement of the Duchess of Ashbourne's inheritance appeared in the Times 3 days later. sparking a frenzy of speculation throughout London society. Amelia had not wanted the publicity, but Alexander insisted. "Society will learn of it regardless," he'd said over breakfast. Better to control the narrative than let gossip distort the truth. He'd been right, of course. The announcement was met with congratulations from well-wishers and barely concealed envy from others. But what Amelia hadn't anticipated was the sharp interest from Alexander's cousin, Lord Edmund Kingswell. Edmund arrived at their Berkeley Square townhouse on a grey morning, unannounced and uninvited. "Cousin," he said, sweeping into the drawing room where Amelia sat reviewing correspondence. "How delightful to find you at home. I've come to offer my congratulations on your extraordinary good fortune." Amelia set down her pen, studying the man before her. Edmund was perhaps 40, with Alexander's dark colouring but none of his commanding presence. His eyes were too close together, his smile too practiced. At their wedding, he'd watched with thinly veiled resentment, and now that same resentment glittered beneath his congratulations. "That's very kind of you, Lord Edmund." "Not at all. Family should celebrate family's success, shouldn't we?" He settled into a chair without invitation. "Though I confess, the timing is rather remarkable. Married 3 months and suddenly inheriting a fortune, some might call it suspiciously convenient." The words were delivered with a smile, but the implication was clear. Amelia felt her spine straighten. "I fail to see what's suspicious about an elderly godmother remembering a goddaughter in her will." "Oh, nothing suspicious at all. Merely fortunate." Edmund's eyes travelled over the elegant drawing-room. "Of course, there are those who might wonder whether you knew about the inheritance before accepting dear Alexander's proposal, whether perhaps you saw an opportunity to secure a duke while possessing hidden wealth. My godmother's health was not public knowledge, Lord Edmund, and her will was her own affair." "Quite right, quite right." He stood, moving to examine a painting on the wall. "Still, you must admit it creates an interesting situation. The Duke of Ashbourne's new Duchess, who arrived with a modest dowry, suddenly revealed to be independently wealthy. Some might say it casts your marriage in a rather mercenary light, on both sides." Before Amelia could respond, Alexander's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Are you suggesting something specific, Edmund, or merely practicing vague insinuation?" Edmund turned, his smile faltering. Alexander stood in the doorway, his expression cold enough to freeze wine. "I was merely offering congratulations to your Duchess, cousin. No offence intended." "Yet, offence given." Alexander moved into the room, positioning himself subtly between Edmund and Amelia. "My wife's inheritance is a private family matter. Whatever gossip you've heard or intend to spread ends here." Of course. Edmund recovered his smile. "I would never spread gossip about family, though I confess others may not be so circumspect. The Duke of Ashbourne's sudden marriage, followed so quickly by his Duchess's unexpected fortune, tongues will wag, Alexander. They always do." "Then let them wag. Anyone who questions my wife's character will answer to me." The threat was unmistakable. Edmund's smile tightened. "Always so protective. I merely suggest that perhaps a bit more transparency about the circumstances of your marriage might silence the gossips. After all, if the marriage was truly a love match rather than a practical arrangement, surely you could demonstrate." "Get out!" Alexander's voice was deadly quiet. "Now." Edmund's mask slipped entirely, revealing naked resentment. "You always were arrogant, cousin, inheriting everything, building your fortune, acting as if the rest of the family doesn't exist. But perhaps your Duchess isn't quite the prize you believe. Perhaps—" "Mrs. Thornbury," Alexander called, never taking his eyes from Edmund. "Lord Edmund is leaving. Please show him out, and inform the staff that he is not to be admitted to this house again without my explicit permission." Edmund's face flushed red. "You cannot bar family from—" "I can and I have. Good day, Edmund." After Edmund departed, slamming the front door hard enough to rattle the windows, Alexander turned to Amelia. The cold fury in his expression softened slightly. "Are you all right?" "Yes, though I confess I don't understand what just occurred. Why is Edmund so hostile?" Alexander sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because until I married, Edmund was my heir. If I died without legitimate children, everything, the title, the estates, the fortune would have passed to him. Our marriage threatened that expectation. Your inheritance has apparently intensified his resentment." "You think he'll cause trouble?" I think Edmund has always been a man who believes the world owes him more than he's earned, but I won't have him troubling you with his poisonous insinuations." He stepped closer, his expression serious. "Amelia, I need you to understand something. There will be people, Edmund, perhaps others, who will question the legitimacy of our marriage, who will suggest it's a sham or an arrangement rather than a genuine union. But it was an arrangement. Initially, yes. But what we've built over these past 3 months," he paused, choosing words carefully, "what we're building now is real, and I'll be damned if I'll let anyone diminish it." The fierceness in his voice sent warmth through Amelia's chest. "What do you suggest we do? Present a united front. Let society see us as partners who chose each other." His jaw tightened. "And if anyone suggests otherwise, they'll face consequences." That evening, over dinner, Alexander was unusually quiet. Amelia watched him push food around his plate, his mind clearly elsewhere. "You're worried about Edmund," she said. He looked up, surprised. "You're perceptive. You're transparent. To me, at least." She set down her fork. "What aren't you telling me?" Alexander was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Edmund isn't working alone. I've heard rumors, nothing concrete yet, that he's been in contact with certain members of society who have reason to resent our marriage." "Who?" "I don't know for certain. But your inheritance has made enemies of those who thought you married me out of desperate necessity. They preferred that narrative. It made you pitiable, manageable. Now you're powerful, and that threatens them." Amelia felt a chill. "You think there's an actual conspiracy?" "I think Edmund is a resentful fool with dangerous friends, and I think we need to be very careful." He reached across the table, taking her hand, a gesture that still felt new, precious. "I won't let anyone hurt you, Amelia. Whatever Edmund is planning, we'll face it together." The words were a promise, a vow more binding than the ones they'd spoken 3 months ago in her father's drawing room. "Together," Amelia agreed, squeezing his hand. But as she lay in bed that night, in her separate chamber with Alexander somewhere in the East Wing, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that Edmund's visit had been merely the opening salvo, that whatever conspiracy was brewing would test not just their social standing, but the still fragile foundation of their marriage. And somewhere in London, in a gentleman's club thick with cigar smoke and whispered conversations, Lord Edmund Kingswell sat across from a man whose golden hair and handsome face had once made Amelia's heart race. Nicholas Barrett smiled over his brandy. "Tell me more about your cousin's Duchess, Edmund. I find myself quite fascinated by her sudden good fortune." Edmund returned the smile. "I thought you might be. After all, you knew Lady Amelia before she became so elevated. Perhaps you could provide insight into her character, her motivations, the kind of woman she truly is." "Oh, I knew her quite well." Nicholas's smile turned cruel. "And I would be delighted to share what I know, for the good of the family, of course." "Of course," Edmund agreed. "For the good of the family." They raised their glasses in a toast, two bitter men united by resentment, plotting in shadows while the object of their conspiracy slept unaware, protected only by a duke's fierce devotion and her own growing strength. The conspiracy had begun, and before it ended, it would test whether a practical arrangement could withstand the crucible of genuine malice, or whether love, still unspoken and fragile, could survive the flames. The fever came without warning on a rain-soaked Tuesday. Amelia had spent the morning at the orphanage. She'd begun patronizing with her new wealth, a crumbling building in Whitechapel that housed 30 children in conditions that broke her heart. She'd returned home chilled and exhausted, dismissing her discomfort as mere fatigue. By evening, she was burning. "Your Grace, please," Sarah begged, wringing her hands as Amelia tried to rise from bed. "You must stay still. Mrs. Thornbury has sent for the physician." "I'm fine," Amelia insisted, though her vision swam. "It's just a chill. I don't need—" The room tilted. Strong hands caught her before she fell. "Stubborn woman," Alexander's voice said above her, rough with something that might have been fear. "When were you going to mention you were ill?" "Didn't want to trouble you," Amelia mumbled, leaning into his solid warmth despite herself. "Parliamentary session important. To hell with Parliament." He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her back to bed. His hand touched her forehead, and his expression darkened. "Christ, you're burning up. How long have you felt unwell?" "Just today. Truly, Alexander, if you say fine one more time, I'll—" He broke off, jaw clenched. "Sarah, Fetch cool water and cloths. Mrs. Thornbury, where is that damned physician? The next 3 days passed in fever dream fragments. Amelia was dimly aware of voices, the physician's grave tones, Mrs. Thornbury's worried murmurs, Sarah's soft crying, but always, there was Alexander, his voice reading to her when she thrashed, his cool hand on her burning forehead, his presence, solid and unwavering, anchoring her when fever tried to pull her under. In her delirium, freed from the constraints of consciousness, Amelia spoke truths she'd never dared voice aloud. Nicholas said I wasn't enough, she whispered into the darkness. Not pretty enough, not wealthy enough, not worthy. He was a fool, Alexander's voice, closer than she'd ever heard it. The blindest fool who ever lived. I tried not to love you, she confessed, tears sliding down her fever-hot cheeks. Tried to be practical, but you're so you defend me, respect me, make me feel. Her voice broke. I love you, Alexander. I know I shouldn't. No, you don't want, but I do. I love you. Strong arms pulled her close. A hand stroked her hair with infinite tenderness. Hush, now. Rest. I'm here. I'm not leaving. Was it real, or merely fever-born fantasy? Amelia couldn't tell, drifting back into darkness with the ghost of sandalwood and safety wrapped around her. When the fever finally broke on the 4th morning, Amelia woke to sunlight and clarity, and to Alexander, slumped in a chair beside her bed, still wearing yesterday's shirt, his hand holding hers even in exhausted sleep. She studied him in the morning, light the dark circles under his eyes, the stubble shadowing his jaw, the deep lines of worry etched into his face. He looked haggard, undone, beautiful. As if sensing her gaze, his eyes opened. For one unguarded moment, she saw everything: relief, fear, and something deeper that made her breath catch. You're awake, he said hoarsely. How do you feel? Weak, but better. She squeezed his hand gently. How long have you been here? 3 days. The physician said it was a dangerous fever. I thought. His voice cracked. I thought I might lose you. I'm sorry I worried you. Don't apologize. Just... He stood abruptly, releasing her hand, and moved to the window. His shoulders were rigid. Amelia, when you were delirious, you said... Her heart stopped. What did I say? He turned to face her, his expression raw. My parents loved each other desperately. That love destroyed everything I inherited. I swore I would never... He broke off, running a hand through his disheveled hair. But these past months with you, watching you transform this house into a home, your kindness to the staff, your intelligence, the way you challenge me, make me laugh, make me times feel asterisk. He crossed back to her, kneeling beside the bed so their eyes were level. I thought I could maintain control, keep my distance, protect myself from becoming my father. His laugh was bitter. But sitting here, terrified of losing you, I realized something. I'm not my father, and you're not my mother. What we have, what we're building, is nothing like their destructive passion. His hand found hers again, trembling slightly. I don't know how to do this properly. I don't have pretty words or romantic gestures, but I need you to know. He took a shaky breath. You were right. This stopped being an arrangement months ago. For me too. Amelia's vision blurred with tears. Alexander, I'm falling in love with you, Amelia. Perhaps I already have, and it terrifies me. She reached up with her free hand, touching his face gently. Then we'll be terrified together. His eyes closed, leaning into her touch, as if it were salvation. Stay with me, not because of our arrangement, not because of duty, but because you want to. I want to, she whispered. I choose you, Alexander. Every day, I choose you. When he kissed her finally, truly it tasted like surrender and victory both. The walls between them, so carefully constructed, had finally crumbled. Carlton House glittered with the full might of London society, 1,000 candles reflecting off mirrors and jewels, the cream of the aristocracy gathered for a parliamentary reception that was more theatre than governance. Amelia stood beside Alexander in the grand ballroom, wearing midnight blue silk and her grandmother-in-law's sapphires. She felt his presence like a shield at her side, warm and solid in a way that still made her heart flutter. 3 weeks had passed since her illness, 3 weeks of transformation. They no longer maintained separate wings. Alexander came to her chambers each night, and they talked for hours in the darkness about everything and nothing, learning each other in ways their practical arrangement had never allowed. He kissed her goodnight with a tenderness that undid her. Sometimes he fell asleep beside her, and Amelia would wake to find him watching her with an expression that made her believe in impossible things. They hadn't yet spoken the words aloud in daylight. Their love remained something whispered in darkness, precious and fragile. But it was real. It was theirs. "You're smiling," Alexander murmured, his hand warm at her waist. "Care to share the thought?" "I was thinking how much has changed since the last ball we attended together." His eyes darkened with heat. "Everything has changed. You've changed everything." Before she could respond, a commotion rippled through the crowd. Voices rose in speculation. Bodies shifted, creating a path. Lord Edmund Kingswell strode through the parted crowd, his face flushed with righteous purpose. Behind him walked several prominent members of Parliament, their expressions grave, and at the back, nearly hidden, Nicholas Barrett, watching with barely concealed anticipation. Amelia's hand tightened on Alexander's arm. He covered it with his own, a silent promise. "Your Grace," Edmund announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent ballroom. "Forgive this intrusion, but there is a matter of grave importance that must be addressed. A matter concerning the legitimacy of your marriage." The room erupted in shocked whispers. Alexander's expression went cold as winter. "You dare." "I dare because duty demands it." Edmund's voice rang with false nobility. "It has come to my attention, through sources I cannot ignore, that your marriage to the Duchess of Ashbourne was contracted under false pretenses. Explain yourself." Alexander's voice was deadly quiet. "The lady arrived with a modest dowry, claiming reduced circumstances, yet within 3 months she conveniently inherited a massive fortune." Edmund turned to address the crowd. "Some might call this suspicious timing. Others might suggest the lady knew of her godmother's failing health and wealth before accepting his Grace's proposal, that she trapped the Duke into marriage while concealing her true financial position." "That's absurd," Amelia said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "My godmother's health was not—" "Furthermore," Edmund interrupted, pulling papers from his coat, "I have testimony from Mr. Nicholas Barrett, who knew Lady Amelia before her elevation. He has provided sworn statements about her character, her circumstances, and her, shall we say, ambitions." All eyes turned to Nicholas, who stepped forward with practiced reluctance. "I take no pleasure in this," he lied smoothly, "but truth must be served. Lady Amelia was quite vocal about her desire to secure a wealthy husband after I regretfully could not offer for her. She spoke often of doing whatever necessary to escape her circumstances." The crowd murmured. Amelia felt the weight of their judgment, the familiar burn of humiliation. "That's a lie," she said clearly. "Nicholas, you know that's not, is it?" Nicholas's smile was cruel. "Or are you simply embarrassed that your scheming has been exposed? You trapped the Duke, then conveniently inherited a fortune to appear less mercenary. But we all know the truth. This marriage is a sham, a calculated arrangement where you traded yourself for a title." "Enough!" Alexander's voice cracked like thunder. But Edmund wasn't finished. "If this marriage was truly genuine," Edmund declared, "the Duke should have no objection to proving it. The law provides remedies for fraudulent marriages. I formally petition for an investigation into the circumstances of this union. If the marriage was contracted under false pretenses or without genuine affection, it can be annulled." The word hung in the air like poison. "You cannot be serious," someone in the crowd gasped. "I am entirely serious." Edmund's eyes glittered with triumph. "The Duke of Ashbourne's marriage affects the succession of one of England's greatest titles. If there is any question of legitimacy, if this was merely a business arrangement rather than a true marriage, the law must intervene." Amelia felt the room closing in. An annulment would destroy her. She would be returned to society as damaged goods, a woman who had lived as a duchess but failed to secure the position. Worse than a spinster, worse than abandoned. She would be ruined. Alexander stood perfectly still beside her, his body rigid with controlled fury. She could feel him warring with himself, his instinct to defend her battling against his ingrained need for emotional control. "Well, Your Grace," Edmund prompted, "have you nothing to say? Can you provide proof that this marriage is genuine, that it was based on affection rather than convenience?" The entire ballroom waited. Behind Edmund, Nicholas smiled the same cruel smile he'd worn when he'd called her unsuitable 2 years ago. Amelia felt tears prick her eyes, not for herself, but for Alexander, because she knew what this moment demanded. She knew what it would cost him to defend their love publicly, to expose the vulnerability he'd spent 14 years protecting. She couldn't ask him to do it. "I can provide proof," she said, her voice clear despite her terror. "I inherited £80,000 and 3 estates. I have documentation showing my godmother's will was executed without my knowledge. I never needed the Duke's wealth." "Money isn't proof of affection, Your Grace," Edmund interrupted. "It merely proves you became wealthy. It doesn't prove this marriage is anything more than a cold arrangement between two practical people." He was right, and they both knew it. The inheritance proved she wasn't a fortune hunter, but it didn't prove love. Amelia looked up at Alexander. His jaw was clenched, his eyes blazing with barely restrained fury. But underneath, she saw fear, the same fear that had kept him distant for months. The terror of becoming his father, of letting love destroy what he'd built. "Alexander," she whispered, "you don't have to." His hand found hers, gripping tight. Then, slowly, he turned to face the crowd, and the Duke of Ashbourne, who had spent 14 years maintaining perfect control, who had sworn never to let emotion rule him, who had built walls around his heart high enough to keep out the world. He let those walls crumble. "You want proof?" Alexander's voice rang out, raw and fierce. "Then listen carefully, Edmund, because I will say this only once." The ballroom held its breath. Alexander's hand tightened around Amelia's, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom. "I did not marry for love," he began, and Amelia's heart clenched. But he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "I married for practicality, for an heir, for a capable duchess who could manage my households and represent my family with dignity." Edmund's smile widened. Nicholas leaned forward eagerly. "I chose Lady Amelia because she was intelligent when I expected vapid, because she spoke her mind when others simpered, because she had survived society's cruelty with grace when others would have crumbled." Alexander's voice softened. "I thought I could maintain distance, keep my heart locked away, as I had for 14 years. He turned to face the crowd, still holding Amelia's hand like a lifeline. "I was a fool." The whispers died completely. "My wife transformed my house into a home I actually wanted to return to. She remembered my housekeeper's daughter was ill and sent the physician without being asked. She reads parliamentary briefs and offers insights that have shaped my votes. She makes me laugh at breakfast. She challenges my assumptions. She sees past the title to the man beneath and, somehow, impossibly, she chooses that man every single day." His voice grew stronger, more passionate. "When she fell ill 3 weeks ago, I didn't leave her bedside for 3 days. Not because duty demanded it, because the thought of losing her nearly destroyed me. Because somewhere between my calculated proposal and her stubborn insistence on staying after her inheritance, I fell completely, irrevocably, in love with my wife." Amelia's vision blurred with tears. "You want proof of affection, Edmund?" Alexander's laugh was bitter. "I am terrified of her, terrified of how much I need her, terrified that I've become exactly what I swore I'd never be, a man ruled by love rather than reason. My parents' passion destroyed a dukedom. I rebuilt it through control, through walls, through refusing to feel anything that might lead to ruin." He looked back at Amelia, his expression raw and unguarded. "But my wife taught me something my parents never understood. Love doesn't destroy when it's built on partnership, on respect, on two people choosing each other not despite their flaws, but because of their strengths. We are not my parents, we are better." His voice rang with absolute conviction. "My wife is the finest woman in England. She didn't need my wealth. Her inheritance proves that. She didn't need my title. She has made the name Ashbourne more respected through her charity and grace than I ever could alone. She certainly didn't need me." His voice cracked slightly. "But she chose me anyway. And if that isn't proof of genuine affection, then I don't know what is." He turned back to Edmund, his expression fierce. "So yes, cousin, this marriage is real, more real than any pretty courtship or romantic performance. We built something honest and true, and I'll be damned before I let you or anyone diminish it." The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then Amelia stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "Since we're sharing truths publicly," she said, reaching into her reticule, "here is mine." She withdrew folded papers, holding them up. "These are letters between Lord Edmund and Mr. Barrett, planning this exact accusation, plotting to have my marriage annulled so Edmund could inherit. They've been conspiring for weeks. Edmund's face went white. Nicholas stumbled backward. My secretary intercepted them yesterday, Alexander added coldly. We came tonight knowing what you'd planned, allowing you to spring your trap so everyone could witness your malice. Those are private correspondence, Edmund sputtered. Private conspiracy to defame a duchess and destabilize a dukedom, Alexander corrected. I have additional evidence showing Nicholas fed you information about Amelia's past, hoping to see her destroyed. Again, he looked at Nicholas with contempt. You couldn't bear seeing her happy, could you? Couldn't stand that she thrived while your own marriage crumbles. But your petty vengeance ends tonight. 2 footmen stepped forward. Lord Edmund, Mr. Barrett, you're both to leave immediately. Your names will be struck from every reputable house in London by morning. As they were escorted out, Edmund protesting, Nicholas silent and pale, the crowd erupted in shocked conversation. But Alexander only had eyes for Amelia. Did I do well? He asked quietly, vulnerability flickering across his face. She pulled him down and kissed him, right there in front of everyone. You did perfectly. The carriage ride back to Berkeley Square passed in charged silence. Alexander sat beside Amelia, not across as propriety would suggest, his hand clasped firmly around hers. Every few moments she felt his thumb trace circles against her palm, as if reassuring himself she was real. You're quiet, she ventured. I'm processing the fact that I just declared my love for you in front of 300 members of the ton. His voice held a note of disbelief. I spent 14 years maintaining perfect control, and I dismantled it in 5 minutes. Do you regret it? He turned to her, his green eyes intense in the carriage's dim light. Not for a single second. I only regret that it took Edmund's conspiracy to make me say what I should have said weeks ago. When they arrived home, Alexander dismissed the servants with uncharacteristic abruptness. Mrs. Thornbury, everyone may retire. We'll require nothing further tonight. He led Amelia up the stairs, still holding her hand, past her chambers and into his own wing rooms she'd never entered before. His bedroom was masculine and surprisingly sparse. Dark wood furniture, hunter green curtains, shelves lined with books rather than decorative objects. I've never brought you here, he said, suddenly uncertain. Our arrangement was always separate chambers, and after we began sharing yours, I thought. Alexander. Amelia stepped closer, placing her hand against his chest. Stop thinking. For once in your carefully controlled life, just feel. Something in him broke. He pulled her against him, his kiss desperate and claiming. Not the tender goodnight kisses they'd shared, but something raw and honest, months of restraint finally unleashed. I was terrified, he breathed against her lips. When you were ill, burning with fever, I realized I'd been lying to myself, pretending I could keep you at arm's length, while my heart had already surrendered completely. Your heart wasn't the only one that surrendered. Amelia's fingers worked the buttons of his waistcoat. I tried so hard to be practical, to accept our arrangement as it was, but you made it impossible. How? His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing her cheeks. Small things. Fresh flowers in my sitting room, always my favorites, though I never told you. Books you'd selected, knowing exactly what would interest me. The way you defended me without being asked. How you listened when I spoke about the orphanage, then quietly arranged funding. Her voice grew thick. You said you couldn't offer affection, but Alexander, you showed me affection every single day. I just had to learn to recognize your language. My parents' love destroyed everything, he said roughly. My father gave my mother everything she wanted. Consequences be damned. Jewels they couldn't afford. Trips that scandalized society. Indulgence without partnership or responsibility. I inherited chaos, masquerading as love. Amelia pulled back slightly, meeting his eyes. Your father loved weakly. He used love as an excuse for recklessness, for avoiding difficult conversations, for choosing pleasure over duty. That's not what we have. No, he agreed, wonder in his voice. You challenge me. Call me out when I'm being stubborn or cold. You're my partner, not my indulgence. We build together rather than tearing down. Exactly, she smiled. So stop being afraid of becoming your father. You're nothing like him. You're a man who spent 3 days at a sickbed despite having parliamentary sessions, who rebuilt a fortune through discipline and intelligence, who protects those under his care fiercely but fairly. A man who loves you. He said it clearly now, no hesitation. I love you, Amelia. Not because you're my duchess or because you're beautiful or wealthy, but because you're stubborn and kind and brilliant and brave. I love you too, she whispered. "I think I started falling the day you defended me from Mrs. Weatherby. You were so fierce, so protective, and you barely knew me." "I knew enough." His hands moved to the fastenings of her gown. "I knew you were exactly who I'd been searching for, without realizing I was searching. May I? Please." They undressed each other slowly, reverently, no desperate fumbling but deliberate unveiling. This wasn't about physical need alone, though desire hummed between them. This was about finally, completely, surrendering every last wall. When Alexander laid her on his bed, he paused, drinking in the sight of her. "I want you to know something. That night we married, when I left you alone, I wanted to come to you. But I was so damn determined to maintain control, to keep this arrangement bloodless and practical. And now? Now I want everything. Your body, yes, but also your mind, your heart, your mornings and evenings, and every moment between." He lowered himself beside her, his hand tracing the curve of her waist. "I want to wake beside you every day, argue about politics over breakfast, hold you when you're sad, and celebrate when you're victorious. I want decades of this, Amelia. A lifetime of choosing you." She pulled him down into a kiss that answered every question. Their joining was both intense and tender passion tempered by profound emotion. Not the destructive fire of his parents' relationship, but something steadier, deeper, a forge that strengthened rather than consumed. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers trailing through her hair. "I stayed," Amelia said softly. "After the inheritance, when you thought I'd leave, I stayed, because somewhere between your practical proposal and your fierce defense, I fell completely in love with you. Best decision you ever made." His arms tightened around her. "Second best," she corrected. "The best was saying yes when a stern duke approached me in a garden and offered me everything except the one thing I secretly wanted, which I then gave you anyway, despite my best efforts to the contrary." She laughed against his chest. "You never stood a chance. I'm very determined when I want something. I've noticed." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Thank God for that. I'd still be locked in my study, pretending I didn't need anyone, if you hadn't been stubborn enough to stay." "We saved each other," Amelia said simply. "Yes," Alexander agreed. "We did." As dawn painted the sky outside, they finally slept truly married at last, not by ceremony or duty, but by choice and love freely given. The walls that had separated them were dust, and what they'd built in their place would stand forever. 5 years later, the Ashbourne Ball had become the event of the London season, not for extravagance, but for the palpable warmth that permeated the glittering ballroom. Amelia stood near the terrace doors, watching Alexander waltz with their eldest daughter. Catherine was 4, standing on her father's polished shoes as he guided her in careful circles, her delighted laughter carrying across the room. Their twin sons slept peacefully in the nursery upstairs. The Duke of Ashbourne, brought low by a tiny tyrant in pink ribbons, Lady Castlereagh observed warmly. "Who would have imagined such a transformation?" "I would have," Amelia said softly. "I always knew who he truly was." The past 5 years had been extraordinary. Alexander had become one of Parliament's most influential voices on social reform, guided by his Duchess's tireless advocacy. Amelia's charitable empire now included 7 orphanages, a women's refuge, and a school for impoverished children. The love match Duke and Duchess, society called them, with equal parts envy and admiration. "Mama!" Catherine abandoned her father, rushing over with childish enthusiasm. "Did you see? Papa taught me to waltz." "I saw, darling. You were magnificent." Amelia kissed her daughter's dark curls. "She has your grace," Alexander said, joining them. "And my stubbornness. God help us when she's 16. A commotion near the entrance drew their attention. The crowd parted, whispers rising. Nicholas Barrett stood in the doorway. 5 years had not been kind to him. His marriage had ended in scandal and divorce. His fortune, mismanaged and gambled away, had evaporated. The handsome man who'd once declared Amelia unsuitable was now gaunt, his expensive clothes slightly shabby. He approached slowly, stopping a respectful distance away. "Your Graces, I apologize for the intrusion. I wanted to offer my congratulations on your family, your happiness." "Thank you, Mr. Barrett," Amelia said politely. Nicholas's eyes fixed on Catherine, then Alexander's protective hand at Amelia's waist, then the obvious devotion between them. "I was a fool. I chose wealth over you, thinking I was being practical." His laugh was bitter. Instead, I lost everything while you gained everything. I gained what I chose, Amelia corrected gently, just as you chose what you valued. May I say one thing? I told myself for years that you weren't enough, not beautiful enough, not wealthy enough, not worthy. But the truth is, I wasn't enough. Not for you. I never would have been. He bowed stiffly. I wish you every happiness. After he departed, shoulders hunched under the weight of his failures, Catherine tugged Amelia's skirt. Mama, who was that sad man? Someone from a long time ago, Amelia said, lifting her daughter. Someone who taught me an important lesson. What lesson? Alexander answered, his arms sliding around Amelia's waist. That the best revenge isn't hurting those who hurt you. It's building something so beautiful, so true, that their cruelty becomes irrelevant. Your papa is very wise, Amelia said, leaning into his strength. Your mama made me that way, Alexander countered, pressing a kiss to her temple. Later, after the last guest departed and Catherine was tucked into bed, Alexander and Amelia stood together in their private sitting room. Do you ever regret it? Alexander asked, pulling her into his arms. Accepting my cold, practical proposal instead of waiting for romance. Amelia laughed. You mean, do I regret marrying England's richest, most handsome duke, who gives me everything I want and loves me with an intensity that still takes my breath away? No, darling. I have no regrets. Good. He kissed her slowly, thoroughly. Because I plan to spend the next 50 years making absolutely certain you never develop any. 50 years of you being protective and possessive and secretly romantic while pretending you're not. Exactly. His eyes gleamed. Think you can bear it? I think I can manage, Amelia said, pulling him toward their bedroom. After all, I'm very determined when I want something. I've noticed, Alexander murmured against her lips. Thank God for that. As they closed the door on the world outside, Amelia reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought her here. A cruel mockery at a ball, a practical proposal from a guarded duke, a marriage that began with everything except love and became everything because of it. Nicholas had been right about one thing. She had gained everything. Not through manipulation or fortune hunting, but through choosing every single day to love a man who'd been terrified of love. Through building partnership from practicality, trust from honesty, and passion from respect. The best revenge, it turned out, wasn't revenge at all. It was simply living extraordinarily well and loving even better.